So, welcome back, everybody. Joining the continuing series of the three of us just randomly chatting topics that are important this week in Illuvium and crypto. And as this is mid November, we're just a couple days after everything that's going on with FTX. There's literally nothing that's more important in the space than the implications of what's going on, what's happening there, and particularly what's going on with projects and the fallout from this. And so, want to get perspective from these two of hey, FTX is going down. What's going to happen with projects and how do they go from here? So, Annie, what are your takes?
Yeah, so for maybe a real quick recap for those that aren't super familiar with the situation, FTX is at the time about a week ago the second largest exchange in crypto. They had let's say like a sister company in Alameda that was an investment organization, and it was discovered through essentially posting of their balance sheets that they had a hole that as of the time of this recording appears to be somewhere between $8 and $10 billion in the actual funds that they had available to the individuals that were on their platform. And so, after really a lot of digging, discussions, analysis by a number of folks, it's become apparent that at least at this point, we can see the two organizations, so Alameda and FTX, were effectively trading money under the table from various investment projects, forcing the investment projects onto the FTX exchange, and then basically, washing the funds back to Alameda to be invested again with another project. So you had this loop where you had unsecured investments for presumably a large number of projects that ended up where we are today. And then, as you can imagine, when that was discovered, there was a run on the FTT token that was for FTX, as well as users trying to pull funds out of the exchange. There are a number of large projects, individuals across the world, literally millions of users that basically have all their funds now lost to them on FTX. There's nothing behind them anymore. So pretty big fallout, massive ramifications, I think, for regulation for the industry, pretty substantial personal harm done to a number of folks in the industry. And honestly, a lot of projects are being negatively impacted by this, whether they were directly involved in the process or not, meaning whether they had funds on FTX, whether they were being funded by Alameda. Many projects now are just seeing a pretty large tightening in the requirements to obtain funds. So whether they're trying to do a capital raise now in some stage of their project, it's a really difficult spot to be in. So it's a little bit of the overview. I think today we want to talk a little bit about the fallout across the market, as well as what does that mean for Web3 gaming projects in general. We've seen some projects have already announced that they've been impacted. I've seen 3 or 4 that either had funds on FTX or that they were otherwise sort of in a second order impact. Solana has had pretty major impacts on it as a chain as well due to this. And so, Vet, maybe we'll jump over to you. What are the kind of general topics that you've seen, discussions that you've had in the past week, and where do we go from here as an industry?
So one of the big things is just everybody saying, how could you possibly keep money on a centralized exchange? Why is anybody doing that in today's day? And like, we should know better and all this stuff. I don't know if that's completely fair. I know that one thing that you mentioned, for example, was that some companies have actually got Alameda as an investor, and Alameda's sort of invested under the terms that they keep X percentage of their runway on FTX, ultimately giving FTX the liquidity to then pump into Alameda to allow Alameda to invest in other projects, and around we go on this pyramid. So it's a new project coming in that's looking for funding. Alameda's willing to do this, so they're like, there's no downside here. FTX is super reputable. We've got Tom Brady, we've got Shaq representing them. What can go wrong ultimately? And so I don't actually blame anyone that's fallen victim to this, because you shouldn't. It's not right. And at the end of the day, like people have been hurt here out of no fault of their own from a company that legitimately, like, there was an arena named after it. Like that's about as reputable as it should be, and yet like this happened. So it's definitely one of the big lessons is, though, keep everything on the blockchain, keep it all decentralized, make sure that your business or your gaming company has done appropriate amount of research into crypto security. I feel very secure with Illuvium because Aaron's gone like really deep into crypto security for Illuvium, and that's why there's like some things that maybe happen slightly slower than in other there's like, to do certain transactions it might take us a few days, or like to get multiple people around the world plugged in for that, but at the end of the day it's worth it because we can sleep at night, and when we're basically unaffected by the situation beyond the impact of the greater market. But regardless, this has set crypto and potentially crypto gaming back potentially years, and that's not good. And we should definitely ensure that this doesn't happen in future. Another big point is regulation. Should these central exchanges be better regulated to prevent this from happening? Because centralized exchanges should be the one place that is at least secure and regulated such that people can actually use them. Because I think that's a big part of onboarding. It's not everybody is wanting to make a wallet and all that, because I don't think there are apps that are just like user friendly enough for non Web3 natives. So
yeah. So let me maybe jump in here because I want to add a key point here on the regulation side. One critical topic that I think is misunderstood a lot, and this is coming. I've talked to 3 or 4 individuals that are not in Web3, they're not in crypto at all, and they know that I am, and they've raised the question, what was going on here. The fundamental reason that this occurred is regulators in the US and in other jurisdictions that would have appropriate controls put in place for this have pushed crypto outside of reputable countries and instead driven it to places that have very limited consumer protections, very limited oversight. And as such, this was not FTX US. FTX US is bankrupt, but they're not the ones that had this hole in their balance sheet because they weren't able to. They had financial disclosure requirements that prevented that from occurring. And so the difference is you had an organization that was based in the Bahamas that had very, very limited reporting requirements that became the magnet for all of the funding, because we haven't been able to get our shit together from a regulatory standpoint in the US to actually allow safe opportunities for exchanges to pop up. And so I think the fact that as a regulator entities, we have to do a better job in the countries that want to see consumer protections, because if you don't, somebody else will create the exchange, right? We've seen this over the years. There's always going to be a desire for people to be able to transact in this space. And so if you don't create it, someone else will. And you also lose the chance then to have any kind of protections built in that you might think are important if your regulatory approach is to just push it away and let somebody else take the lead here. I think, frankly, Europe has been even worse with the EU than the US. They've basically said, like, we don't want crypto in general here, from the way that the regulators have taken the approach. But as an industry, I think we need to have appropriate regulation, starting, like you said, Vet, with centralized exchanges. They should be regulated in basically the same way that banks are, because that's what they're doing, right? They're holding users' funds. You should be required. You can't have fractional reserves for that. You've got to have $1, an ETH, a Bitcoin, whatever token someone's holding in your exchange. You've got to have it backed, and not partly backed because, by the way, we sent 10 times that amount to our our VC hedge fund over here to let them go play with the magic money. So, Deraji, over to you. What do you think as far as major high level topics coming out of this?
So I'm actually going to take the novice approach on this one of what's the person that isn't in the space seeing, and what's the implications from that. And to Vetemor's point, like, Arena in Miami was FTX Arena until a couple of days ago. Major League Baseball umpires had the FTX patch. Like, this is going to become a Lehman Brothers moment to an extent for people of like, this is just further validating my belief that crypto is a scam. and why do I want to be associated with it? And for me, like tying into Illuvium and other Web3 gaming projects, like where success comes from is mainstream adoption. There's only so much that we can do. And we look at Axie and kind of argue value extraction versus value contribution. And what do I want to play? Like, am I getting those eyeballs to consider me at all? And is this the story that they're thinking about? And it's like, oh, but Tom Brady and Matt Damon, and this is what happened. It's like, they're not going to know the whole story. They're not going to watch this video or research into it. They're just going to say, this is just a further evidence that sets the overall space back. And I'm going to keep playing my World of Warcraft and know I'm just losing $15 a month and getting that entertainment back. And so what are we going to do as an industry to pivot over and get them back and counteract? It's not, we're starting from zero. We're starting from negatives at this point and need to build back in. And that's the challenge that every one of these, Celsius, Voyager, FTX, it's just moving us negative along that line that we need to counteract with actual products and people that want to build the space for the reason the three of us are in it.
If I could build on what you've just said, I agree completely, which is that this has nothing to do with crypto. What went wrong is nothing to do with the underlying value proposition of crypto or its ability or inability to do or solve some kind of problem. It's got absolutely nothing to do with it. It's to do with Sam and the Alameda people ultimately creating a Ponzi that ultimately crumbled. That's what's happened. Crypto and Ponzi's, they've been mentioned in the same sentence before, but they are not related in this specific scenario. It's just two different. But to pull this into gaming, which is where you are taking it, how do we as gaming make sure that this doesn't tarnish us? And I think this is actually, at least in gaming, I think there's a light here, which is that what we've been actually trying to do is move away from calling ourselves crypto games, calling ourselves GameFi, and calling ourselves play to earn, and really branding as AAA normal game. Like, we don't even use any of those words. We're games, and we're sick games. That's what we're trying to produce, sick games, and the onboarding has no crypto in it. And then you get into it, and then crypto crumbles it like just sort of comes in. But like the initial experience needs to be the same as playing World of Warcraft. When you play World of Warcraft, you have a wallet created for you within the game that nobody tells you you've got a wallet created, and nobody gives you a seed phrase for it. But you have a wallet in which there's like your gold and your inventory and whatever. It's the digital wallet. So people are actually very familiar with digital wallets. It's actually something that gamers are incredibly familiar with. So we just need to find that way of creating digital wallets without telling people we're doing it for them. And then once they get into the game, enjoy the game, and their assets are actually potentially worth some kind of money because they've probably spent some money, then they can actually sell those if they want to. And it's at that point where we will prompt them and inform them that, and it will be an easy onboarding, offboarding experience. And people will be educated through the process about crypto and its actual true utility rather than what it says in the news or whatever. And I think, like, a lot of people in the Illuvium space, as much as we're investors, we're probably, for the most part, retail investors that are here because we're gamers, and we heard the dream of actually being able to own assets within a game, and it's that which sold us. We're not here just to make a quick buck. We're here because we actually believe in the vision of, well, actually, like, I remember as a kid playing games, spending money, and at the end of the day, if I want to sell my account and I get caught, breach of terms of service, my account is deleted. And that's like, the time, sweat, tears, and money I've invested is like just gone because Blizzard is just got their own thing, and that's it. And like, that's what this solves. And I think that's the way that we get through this, by not labeling ourselves as crypto and being in this exactly the same shelf on the bookshelf.
Yeah, I think you are 100% right, Vet. We have to have simple onboarding processes and simple custodial processes to where your average gamer doesn't know that it's crypto. I like to think of it. It's a similar example that Andrew uses often. Um, I don't assume that anyone that uses HTML or that anyone that uses Amazon Web Services is a criminal. There are plenty of criminals who use both of those technologies, but they're just that. They're underlying technologies. And like any other tool, they can be used for great good or they can be used for great evil. And it depends on the person. It depends on the oversight that you have, the governance structures, the regulation. Yes, all of that plays a big difference. In this case, with the transparency of code on the blockchain, with the transparency of transactions that are inherent in crypto technology, you have the ability to build in ways to make it much more difficult for someone to actually carry out a lot of the activities that we saw here. In this case, if you look at what happened with FTX, they actually paid most of their blockchain contracts off before everything started to crash. Why? Because liquidations happen automatically for you. If you don't have something backing your assets, it's gone. There's no recourse. You don't get to go and argue with someone and say, "Oh, well, it's okay. We'll just go to trial for this." And 10 years later, all of a sudden, you get it sorted out in bankruptcy court. That's not the way it works in crypto. You actually have immutable code that really manages that entire process for you. And so, in general, it's a technology that gives us the ability to steer the process better. What we have to do, though, is go to gamers with the use case, which, like you said, is, hey, this is your wallet. You don't need to know that there's Ethereum underneath it, or that there's Bitcoin in there, or that there's USDC. Like, we should just show you the dollar amount, or the euro amount, or the yen amount, or whatever currency you're in, and based on that, you put some money in. You play the game. When you want to sell something, you sell it for dollars or euro or yen or whatever. Make it as simple as you possibly can for them. And that's the way that you get adoption, because the use case is great. The perception of the technology is what's really bad right now. But that's also something that we saw. The early days of the internet were very much the same. This whole thing is a scam. Why would I go online when I can just walk into a store and buy something, right? To us, that's ridiculous. Who sitting here today in 2022 would be like, why would I ever order something online when I could just go to a store to pick it up? Of course you're not going to say that today, right? That would never cross your mind, but it's because we're shaped our perceptions by the world that we live in. And so 10 years from now or 20 years from now, people are going to look at this and say, well, of course, why would I play a video game where I can't own things? Because it's my stuff, it's my virtual stuff. But today, we have to show them that that's the promise, that's the use case, and navigate away to a large extent from what's underlying it technologically until we get to a point where the mainstream understands, hey, there are bad use cases and people, did bad things with it, but it doesn't mean that like the internet wasn't bad because pets.com rugged their entire, investors in the early stages, right? Deraji, what do you think here about Web3 and how we approach this as a sector?
No, I think that's 100% correct. And it's, you got to prove the utility. And I think right now, what is heard in the mainstream is I bought this thing and I got rich, or I had this friend that put his money in and now he's got nothing. Like, those are the stories that translate because those are the sound bites. And honestly, early Web 2 days, like, that was the same story of, it was the company that crashed. It was Amazon that started in a basement and became $1 trillion company. Like, it's binary. But the reason it persists isn't that. The reason it persists is utility.
Yeah.
Very well said. So, as we look at the fallout on the Web3 gaming industry, I mean, we've talked about, there are a number of projects that have announced impacts. Again, there are three or four that I've seen that have lost funds. There are a lot that are having difficulties with capital raises. What do you guys see from the industry, from the builders, the founders, the investors that are here right now? And where do we go in the next steps? Maybe not for like overall user acquisition and customer acquisition, but where do we go sort of internal as a community to put our focus on moving forward? Vet, we'll send it over to you.
Well, what do you mean by that? Like, is it not just building? Like, we need to build the products that can then onboard without, having that tarnish that crypto seems to have. I think it's the same for non-GameFi projects as well. I think there's a lot of projects that what I think is also missing in the crypto space is projects that are really just beautiful UI that also just use the utility of crypto but in a user-friendly way. I don't know why there aren't like simple savings apps, like a crypto savings app where all you do is just buy in, like put some money from your bank account in there, and you just have your USDC in there. It's just USDC. It doesn't offer anything else on this app. It just offers USDC staking, and it's done in a way that's like cleanly managed with blockchain, so it's completely secure, like properly collateralized, all the good stuff, and you're just earning more on your savings than you would in a savings account. But like this is just such a simple utility that would be legit life-changing because it's better than any bank. And all they have to do is then just get a bank. Like all that projects need to do is build. And all they need to do is build that good quality products that people can use and that deliver benefit to them. I mean, I think it goes to that level of simplicity. But like, do you mean on like a more fundamental level? Do you mean on like financial level? What were you getting at, Annie? Because
Go ahead, Deraji, you want to jump in?
Yeah. I was just going to push on that and say there's a lot of things that are building today, but how does the average person that doesn't do the research, and even like that you and I have been talking for years now, it seems like we've seen stuff that's good, and like as we've gotten in, it's like, yeah, there's actually people building here, and stuff that's a total scam.
Yeah.
And we're looking at it deeply, talking to a bunch of other people that spend way more time than people off the street are going to do. And so that's the other piece. It's not enough to have a clearly understand proposition. I'm going to actually say the controversial thing and say you need to invite regulation in. Like you need something that's third party that gives you validity and a backing at this point. That's not just trust us or even point to, but it's all on the blockchain, because most people aren't going to look at that. And so how do you balance countries and continents that don't want to touch it, DAOs that are afraid because you don't necessarily have guidance, and I don't want to cross the line where I draw attention negatively, but actually partner to build that validity, be it government, be it NGO, something that isn't just, I'm making something good, trust me, try it.
I agree completely. My question is, what do we want to regulate? In the sense of, do we regulate anything that calls itself a company, or like a website that's just made some blockchain code and is doing lending, but it's all just on the blockchain? It's all just smart contracts. Are we talking regulate how smart contracts should and shouldn't be done, and have that evolve? Like, to what degree do you think regulation should be done to establish that validity?
I think that's a whole different conversation that we could have of what does regulation look like, or how do you invite that in? I'm just speaking from what's it going to take to get mainstream to buy back in. It's not just utility. So I just argued Web 2, why does it persist? Utility. But behind all of that, there were the companies that failed. There were things that like the government stepped in. They actually understood it. And I think that's where we're at today of, if we look at, I'm in the US, do I trust my House of Representatives and Senate that are 70, 80 years old to understand utility and technology behind blockchain? No. You need somebody that's willing to push that, because that's the safety net and the assurance that's going to help the public get back in after this is what their exposure's been so far.
That's fair point.
Yeah. I think that's 100% right. When we talk about regulation, there's plenty of blame to go around here, right? The industry has done everything it can to just try and avoid any type of regulation, which I think is counterproductive. the governments have not passed any sort of, at least in the U.S. and most other jurisdictions, haven't passed any sort of bills or laws that actually give some clarity to the point. The regulators have just taken the we're going to regulate by enforcement and just hope you don't have us set our sights on you. And to the point now, it looks like we've seen what appears at the moment in, again, middle of November 2022, that the SEC chairman has been basically in bed with SBF here and FTX the whole time, to the point that we've seen now publicly available memos where they were basically setting up a sweetheart deal for FTX to be able to skirt regulation so they could have their own built-in moat around the process. So I think we've got a lot of blame to go around here for all of the parties in the space. What needs to really happen now is there needs to be a productive discussion about what is the appropriate level of regulation. What do we need to start with regulating? The legislators need to step up and actually pass some laws that give transparency. And then the regulators need to explain, how does that actually work? The question, how do I apply the Howey test when all of a sudden I can create my own currency after just an hour's worth of coding? Like, that was a concept that didn't exist 10 years ago. And so the question, how do you regulate that, all of a sudden is the same way you ask, well, if I've got a 3D printer, how do I regulate manufacturing? Well, okay, before I could go to the manufacturer and say, like, hey, show me your plants. Show me what you're building here. What's the safety requirements that we have? What do we have as far as reporting of products and of raw materials and so on? What does that look like when I can just buy a printer from from Amazon and hit a button, and all of a sudden I have to build whatever I want, right? So technology always is pushing the boundaries of the limits of what regulation can accomplish. But it's been long enough, right? We need to have some transparency here. We're over a decade in. The crypto experiment is still here to stay. I mean, you look at the valuations after everything that's gone on in 2022, things are still moving very quickly in the space. And so it's time for us to see some more transparency. Coming back maybe to your question earlier, Vet, in terms of the industry, I guess what I'm seeing right now is a lot of concerned individuals that are here building, whether they're founders and sort of the C-suite of these projects, that they're looking at the market conditions and saying, oh my God, whatever my runway is, it's not enough. We had the discussion yesterday about, what are things that we can do as Illuvium to make sure that we're positioning ourselves effectively with appropriate financial resources. And they're looking at it and saying, all of my backers are super gun shy right now about making anything, any investments in my project. I've got developers. I've had 4 or 5 different developers or community managers that have talked to me just in the last 2 days alone about, hey, I'm worried I might be losing my job here. I might be looking to go back to Web 2 into the tech industry, but like, they're laying off everyone too. You look at Meta, and you look at Twitter, you look at Stripe, and so forth. It's a difficult time for the economy. So in terms of empathy for those that are in the space, I think that's a really important to have, and that we can to support each other and those that are impacted by in many cases, situations that are outside of their control. So we've talked a lot about this. It's a challenging time for many of us. I want to just give a chance for each of you for any final thoughts on sort of the FTX saga and where we're going to go from here as we go to the end of 2022. So, Vet, I'll throw it over to you first.
Well, I just hope that this isn't just a permanent stain on crypto for too long, and I really do hope that at the end of the day, the utility does shine through, and I do hope that regulators begin looking at crypto and really investigating crypto and actually like regulating it, because until they do start doing that, it is the wild west, and there are going to continue to be people that get hurt because there's just no controls. There's no measures in place to ensure that things like this don't happen.
Good point. Deraji?
Yeah, I'm gonna say just empathy within. Like, we're hang out in these communities a lot. We have friends that are really heavily invested in a lot of things, and you don't know what somebody's going through. And this is a really hard time, to no fault of their own, where folks are at right now, and things change very quickly in the space. And so just advocating, we don't know how long this is going to last. We need to do what's right for ourselves, but we need to be empathetic and sympathetic for those around us and look at what can we offer within our powers and how do we set up projects for success of connecting to the right funding, folks that are looking for jobs. How do we encourage them to do the right thing for them at this point?
Yeah, really good point.
Annie, where are you at?
Yeah, so I think in general, making sure that we as individuals don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here. That there's a lot of bad that we've all seen in just the past week and been exposed to. Recognizing though that the potential of this underlying technology in this space to dramatically improve the lives of literally billions of people is meaningful, and so looking at short-term price action, looking at the really frankly despicable acts of a small number of people in the space shouldn't color your judgment completely. I would say certainly each person needs to take a step back, look at where they are on the risk spectrum, with their own personal financial situation. So I'm not advocating that anyone go in further or stay in longer. Don't withdraw your funds, whatever. That's up to you. You need to make sure that you can sleep effectively at night with wherever you are. Do take the appropriate actions to be safe with your wallets and your holdings. But making sure that you really think about why you're here, and do you really believe in the technology, or were you really just hoping to get rich? And I think you can challenge yourself with that. And I'm not going to say there's anything wrong if your goal was just to get rich here. That's fine. If you do think that the underlying tech, the community, the ethos of this space, there's something more to it. Even if you decide I'm not going to try to get rich anymore, maybe stick around, because there's going to be a lot of amazing things that I think get built over the next couple of years, regardless of the short-term price activity. I think on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Well, thank you all for joining us. This has been a really fun series. Both Deraji and Vet, it's been a pleasure. We don't catch up often enough, but hopefully you all enjoyed the chance to chat with us.
Thanks for coming on, boys.
Anytime.
Very good. Take care, everyone.